11. What is natural selection? When does it occur? Natural selection is a process in which more environment-adapted organisms tend to survive and reproduce more frequently than less environment-adapted ones. Natural selection happens when individuals with a particular genotype have a higher chance of surviving, reproducing, and passing on their alleles to the following generation than individuals with a different genotype. What is macroevolution? Macroevolution is evolution that takes place at or above the species level. It is the outcome of many generations worth of microevolution. Macroevolution can involve the coevolution of two species that interact, or it can involve the emergence of one or more novel species. What is microevolution? Microevolution is simply a change in gene frequency within a population. Short periods of time can be used to observe evolution at this scale. For example, the frequency of a gene for brown coloration in a population of beetles increases between generations. Define population genetics. Population genetics is a branch of biology that studies the genetic composition of biological populations as well as changes in genetic composition caused by various factors such as natural selection. What are the different forms of evidence for evolution? ENS. Fossils, anatomy and embryology, and convergence of form. Darwin supported his theory of evolution by natural selection with multiple lines of evidence, including fossil evidence, biogeographical evidence, and anatomical evidence. Define allopatric speciation. Allopatric speciation is a type of speciation in which biological populations are physically separated by an extrinsic barrier and evolve intrinsic, genetic, reproductive isolation to the point where individuals in the population can no longer interbreed if the barrier breaks down. Define sympatric speciation. Sympatric speciation occurs when two groups of the same species live in the same geographic area but evolve differently to the point where they can no longer interbreed and are considered different species. What are some common misconceptions of evolution? ENS. Evolution is a theory. Individuals evolve. Evolution explains the origins of life. Organisms evolve on purpose. Evolution is controversial among scientists. Evolution leads to progress. As a result of evolution, organisms continuously improve. Individual organisms can change over the course of one lifetime. Evolution only happens gradually and slowly. Evolution is a slow process, so humans cannot change it. What is the biological definition of a species? A species is frequently defined as the largest group of organisms in which any two individuals of the appropriate sexes or mating types can produce fertile offspring, most commonly through sexual reproduction. What are vestigial structures? Vestigial structures are structures that have no apparent function and appear to be remnants of a previous ancestor. Vestigial structures include the human appendix, a snake's pelvic bone, and the wings of flightless birds. What does the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium state? The Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, HWE, is a fundamental principle of population genetics that states that in quad, genotype frequencies in a population remain constant between generations in the absence of outside disturbance. In quad. What is adaptation? An adaptation is any heritable trait that aids an organism's survival and reproduction in its environment, such as a plant or animal. Chapter 12. What is phylogeny? A phylogenetic tree, also called the phylogeny, is a diagram that shows the evolutionary branches from which various species, organisms, or genes have descended from one another. What does scientists in the field of systematics does? ENS. Organize and classify organisms. Systematics, also known as taxonomy, is a study of past and present organisms, as well as the relationships between them. Systematists collect and study a wide range of plants and animals, classifying them based on patterns of variation. Which is the most specific category in the taxonomic classification system? ENS. Species. The most specific major taxonomic rank is species. Species are occasionally divided into subspecies, but not all species have multiple forms that are distinct enough to be called subspecies. What describes the relationship between whales and humans? ENS. Both evolved from a common ancestor. They both evolved from a common ancestor. Scientists have used computer analysis to read evolution backward and reconstruct a large part of the genome of an 80-million-year-old mammal. This tiny shrew-like creature was the ancestor of humans and other living mammals including horses, bats, tigers, and whales. What are analogous traits? How analogous traits develop? ENS. In response to similar environmental pressures. An analogy or homoplasy occurs when similar characteristics occur due to environmental constraints rather than a close evolutionary relationship. Insects, like bats and birds, use wings to fly, but the wing structure and embryonic origin are completely different. Analogous structures evolve as a result of natural selection in the same or similar environments by different groups of organisms. The organism's similarity is referred to as homoplasy, which means in quad, from the same mold or form. In quad, the mold represents the environment, and the form represents analogous structures. What are the different assumptions of cladistics? Cladistics is based on three fundamental assumptions. 1. Characteristics change over time in lineages. 2. Any group of organisms can be traced back to a common ancestor. 3. A bifurcating, or branching, pattern of lineage splitting exists. What is a monophyletic group? A monophyletic group, also known as a clade, consists of the ancestral taxon and all of its offspring. A non-monophyletic group requires 2 or more cuts to be removed from the root than a monophyletic group can with just 1. What is molecular systematics? In general, molecular systematics provides a strong statistical framework for hypothesis testing and estimating evolutionary processes, such as divergence times between taxa. What is the relationship between the wings of birds and bats? And they are homologous structures because they share a common ancestor. Bat and bird wings are homologous structures, indicating that bats and birds evolved together. It is important to note that it is not a single bone, but rather a grouping of several bones arranged similarly. What is binomial nomenclature? Binomial nomenclature is a biological system for naming organisms in which the name is made up of 2 terms, the first of which indicates the genus and the second the species of the organism. Chapter 13. What were the first forms of life on Earth? The earliest known life forms are microscopic organisms, microbes, which left traces of their existence in rocks 3.7 billion years ago. A particular class of carbon molecule produced by living things made up the signals. What is the difference between gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria? Gram-negative bacteria have a thin peptidoglycan cell wall that is surrounded by an outer lipopolysaccharide-containing membrane. Gram-positive bacteria lack an outer membrane but are surrounded by peptidoglycan layers that are many times thicker than those found in gram-negative bacteria. Which 2 kingdoms consist of prokaryotic cells? And bacteria and archaea. There are 2 kingdoms of prokaryotes. These are bacteria, also called eubacteria, and archaeobacteria, or the archaea. What is conjugation in bacteria? Bacterial conjugation, also known as bacterial sex, is a major horizontal gene transfer mechanism in which DNA is transferred directly from a donor to a recipient bacterium. What are the different ways by which protists can reproduce asexually? The majority of protists reproduce via a process known as binary fission. Multiple fission and budding are the other 2 types of asexual reproduction that protists use. Protists that reproduce asexually include amoeba, euglena, trypanosoma, and plasmodium. What are saprobes? Saprobes are a type of fungus that decomposes dead and decaying wood, leaves, litter, and other organic matter. They secrete enzymes that break it down in order to digest it. This releases and recycles vital nutrients for other organisms while also aiding in the disposal of organic waste. Which parasitic protist causes malaria? The malarial protozoa are plasmodium. A mosquito vector spreads the parasites. When an infected mosquito bites a host, parasites are transmitted into the host's blood. What is mycorrhiza? And close association of a fungus with the root of a tree. A mycorrhiza is a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and a green plant. By using photosynthesis, the plant creates organic molecules like sugars and gives them to the fungus. The fungus then gives the plant water and mineral nutrients from the soil, like phosphorus. Why are treatments of fungal infections challenging? Resistance can significantly reduce the range of available treatments because there are currently only a few different types of antifungal medications. Some fungi, like Candida auris, have the potential to develop resistance to every antifungal medication typically used to treat these infections. Why are fungi beneficial to humans? Fungi are used by people for a variety of things, including as food and in food preparation. Fungi are also used by people to control pests. Additionally, citric acid, antibiotics, and human hormones can all be made by fungi. Chapter 14. What is the event that leads from the haploid stage to the diploid stage in alternation of generations? And fertilization. Meiosis is where a diploid cell gives rise to haploid cells, and fertilization is where 2 haploid cells, gametes, fuse to form a diploid zygote. What are the benefits of plants having the ability to reproduce both sexually and asexually? And genetic recombination can occur and plants can adapt to different environments. Both approaches have advantages. Sexual reproduction is beneficial for developing a diverse gene pool capable of withstanding a dynamic and changing environment. Asexual reproduction is advantageous for organisms that cannot move and for creating a large, uniform population. Name the different divisions of bryophytes or non-vascular plants. Non-vascular plants, also known as bryophytes, are divided into 3 groups: mosses, Bryophyta, which have approximately 15,000 species, liverworts, Hepaticophyta, which have approximately 7,500 species, and hornworts, Anthophyta, which have approximately 250 species. Organisms from which division of bryophytes slows down erosion, provides food for small and large animals and are often used to monitor air quality. Mosses help to slow erosion, store moisture and soil nutrients, and provide shelter and food for small animals as well as larger herbivores like the musk ox. Mosses are extremely sensitive to air pollution and are used to monitor it. What is the function of xylem? The vascular plant tissue xylem transports water and nutrients from the soil to the stems and leaves. Xylem is essential for supporting tissues and organs, as well as maintaining plant architecture and resistance to binding. What is the function of phloem? The primary function of phloem tissue is to transport carbohydrates from sources to sinks via sieve elements. Phloem also contains parenchyma cells, which are important in the storage of water, non-structural carbohydrates, and storage proteins. What is the difference between gymnosperms and angiosperms? ENS. Gymnosperms have naked seeds with no flowers or fruit. Angiosperms are flowering plants that may also contain fruit. Angiosperms are also referred to as flowering plants because they contain seeds inside of their fruit. Gymnosperms, on the other hand, have bare seeds on the surface of their leaves but no flowers or fruits. The seeds of gymnosperms are arranged as cones. Name the male reproductive parts of the flower. Stamens. The male reproductive cell, pollen, is produced by the anther, which is part of the stamen, along with the filament. Name the female reproductive parts of the flower. Pistils. The pistil includes an ovary, where the ovules are produced. Ovules are the female reproductive cells, the eggs, and a stigma, which receives the pollen during fertilization. What are monocots? ENS. Have one cotyledon, example corn. Monocotyledons, or monocots, are a class of angiosperms that contains only one seed leaf in the embryo. What are dicots? ENS. Have two cotyledons, example beans. Dicotyledon is any member of the flowering plants, or angiosperms, that has a pair of leaves, or cotyledons, in the embryo of the seed. Chapter 15. What are diploblasts? Diploblastic animals are those whose cells are organized into the external ectoderm and internal endoderm of two embryonic layers. A diploblastic example is a coelenterate. Between the ectoderm and the endoderm is a layer of undifferentiated tissue called the mesoglea. What are triploblasts? Triploblastic organisms are those that have three primary embryonic cell layers, namely the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm, from which different tissues and organs of the animal's body differentiate. Consider the frog. What are ocealomates? An ocolomate is a creature without a coelom, or formal body cavity. Only multicellular organisms with true tissues have true body cavities. Within this group, the eumetazoa, are organisms with only two basic tissues, such as coral and jellyfish. What is the difference between protostomes and deuterostomes? The primary distinction between protostomes and deuterostomes is how they develop during the early embryonic stages. The mouth opening is the first to form in protostomes, followed by the anus. The anus forms first in deuterostomes, followed by the mouth. This all happens during the gastrulation stage. What is fragmentation in sponges? Asexual reproduction is typically accomplished through fragmentation, in which a piece of the sponge breaks off, settles on a new substrate, and develops into a new individual, or budding. A genetically identical outgrowth from the parent eventually detaches or remains attached to form a colony. What specialized cells do cnidarians have that are concentrated around the mouth and tentacles of the animal and can immobilize prey with toxins? Almost all cnidarians, about 99%, are marine species. Cnidarians have specialized cells called cnidocytes, and quad, stinging cells and quad, that contain organelles known as nematocysts. These cells are concentrated around the animal's mouth and tentacles and can immobilize prey with toxins. What is the difference between flatworms and nematodes, roundworms? ENS. Flatworms are a colomate with most having an incomplete digestive system, whereas nematodes are pseudocolomate with complete digestive systems. Roundworms and flatworms both fall under the phylum Nematoda, while Platyhelminthes is the home of the former. The main distinction between flatworms and roundworms is that the former have a body that is dorsoventrally flattened, whereas the latter have a cylindrical body that is tapered to a point at each end. What are the main features of arthropods? ENS. Presence of fused segmented bodies divided into head, thorax and abdomen and jointed appendages. An arthropod's body is segmented, triploblastic, and bilaterally symmetrical. They display the organization's level at the organ system level. Their head, abdomen, and thorax make up their body. They can move around on jointed legs. Blood is in their coelomic cavity. Arthropods' circulatory systems are open. Their digestive system is developed. They breathe through the surface of their body. They have sensory organs like auditory organs, simple and compound eyes, hair, statocysts, and hair. They have one sexual sex. Additionally, fertilization occurs both internally and externally. What are the three key characteristics of mollusks? Mollusks possess soft body without segments and bilateral symmetry. Internal or external shells are present. The radula is a toothed tongue that is primarily made of chitin. What are annelids? ENS. Segmented worms that include earthworms and leeches. Annelids are segmented worms of the phylum. Leeches, earthworms, and polychaete worms are examples of annelids. All group members are segmented to some degree, that is, they are divided into segments by subdivisions that only partially cross the body cavity. What are examples of echinoderms? Examples of echinoderms include sea stars, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, brittle stars, and feather stars. What are the 4 key features of chordates? The 4 distinctive characteristics that, taken together, set chordates apart from all other phyla are the notochord, single, dorsal, tubular nerve cord, pharyngeal pouches, and postanal propulsive tail. Which animals possess a backbone, gills, and a central nervous system in at least one phase of development? All animals with backbones, gills, and a central nervous system in at least one stage of development are included in the subphylum Vertebratae. Along with jawless fish, bony fish, sharks, and rays, vertebrates also include amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds. What are examples of jawless fishes? Ents, hagfishes and lampreys. The hagfish and lampreys are among the fish without jaws. What are examples of jawed fishes? Ents, sharks, rays, skates, bony fishes. Jawed fish include cartilaginous and bony fish. What are the adaptations that help reduce body weight in birds? Birds' lighter bodies are caused by their hollow or honeycombed bones. And birds evolved a light, functional beak made of keratin in place of bulky jawbones and teeth. What group of vertebrates have hair and mammary glands used to provide nutrition for their offspring? Mammals. Vertebrate creatures called mammals have hair and mammary glands that are used to produce milk for their young. Mammals also have specific characteristics in their internal anatomy, skeleton, skin, and jaw. One of a mammal's essential characteristics is the presence of hair. Chapter 16. What are endotherms? Animals that depend on or are capable of producing heat internally are known as endotherms. What are ectoderms? Ectotherm, any cold-blooded animal, that is, any animal whose body temperature regulation is dependent on external sources such as sunlight or a heated rock surface. What does the urinary system consist of? Ents, kidneys, ureter, urinary bladder and urethra. The urinary system organs include the kidneys, renal pelvis, ureters, bladder, and urethra. The body uses nutrients from food to create energy. After the body has absorbed the necessary food components, waste products are excreted in the bowel and blood. What is the esophagus? What is its function? The esophagus is a muscular tube that transports food from the throat to the stomach. The esophagus primarily serves as a transport tube, directing the passage of food and fluids from the mouth to the stomach. What is the function of the small intestine? Ents, primarily digestion of proteins, carbs and fats. It aids in the digestion of food from the stomach. It absorbs nutrients, vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and water from food so that the body can use them. What is the function of the large intestine? Ents, primarily reabsorption of water from undigested food material. The large intestine's function is to absorb water and salts from material that has not been digested as food and to eliminate any waste products that remain. The majority of digestion and absorption has already occurred by the time food mixed with digestive juices reaches your large intestine. When does acid reflux occur? Acid reflux occurs when the lower esophageal sphincter muscle relaxes at the wrong time, allowing stomach acid to back up into your esophagus. Heartburn and other signs and symptoms may result from this. Gout may develop as a result of persistent or frequent reflux. What is the function of the trachea? The trachea's main job is to allow your lungs to breathe, which involves taking in oxygen-rich air and exhaling carbon dioxide. What are exocrine glands? A gland that produces and releases bodily fluids like saliva, sweat, tears, milk, and digestive juices through a duct or other opening to a body surface. Sweat glands, lacrimal glands, salivary glands, mammary glands, and digestive glands in the stomach, pancreas, and intestines are a few examples of exocrine glands. What are endocrine glands? A gland that produces hormones that are immediately released into the blood and travel to all of the body's tissues and organs. Numerous bodily processes, including growth and development, metabolism, and fertility, are regulated by endocrine glands. The pituitary, thyroid, and adrenal glands are a few examples of endocrine glands. What do arteries do? The blood vessels in your cardiovascular system known as arteries transport oxygen-rich blood from your heart to every cell in your body. They are essential for supplying your body with nutrients, hormones, and oxygen. What do veins do? There are two main uses for veins. One function is to gather oxygen-poor blood from various parts of your body and return it to your heart. The other function is to deliver blood that is rich in oxygen to your heart from your lungs. Only at this time do veins transport blood that is oxygenated. Define synovial joints. A synovial joint is a type of joint found between bones that move against each other, such as limb joints, for example shoulder, hip, elbow and knee. It has a fluid-filled joint cavity as a defining characteristic. Define cartilaginous joints. Cartilaginous joints are specialized types of joints, which are classified based on their structure. These joints, which lack a joint cavity and consist of bones connected by either fibrocartilage or hyaline cartilage, are primarily involved in a slight movement. Define fibrous joints. Fibrous joints are defined as the joints in which the bones are connected by fibrous tissue. Because they prevent any movement between the bones, these joints are also known as fixed or immovable joints. They lack a joint cavity, and the collaged fibers that make up the fibrous tissue that connects the bones are present. What is the parasympathetic nervous system responsible for? ENS. And quiet, rest and digest and quiet, response. The parasympathetic nervous system is a network of nerves that relaxes your body after stressful or dangerous situations. During times when you feel secure and at ease, it also aids in the operation of life-sustaining processes like digestion. What is the sympathetic nervous system responsible for? ENS. And quiet, fight or flight and quiet, response. The sympathetic nervous system is best known for its role in a person's reaction to a dangerous or stressful situation. When this happens, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in to help you escape danger by increasing your heart rate, pumping more blood to areas of your body that need it, and other responses,